So let's jump right in. We're going to look at this incredible moment in history where a new leader, facing the grief of an entire nation and the threat of total collapse, had to make a decision. A decision that honestly seemed strategically insane, but it would end up defining the future of his community and giving us a timeless lesson in leadership. This is the story of the army of Usamah. To really get the weight of this moment, you have to picture the city of Medina, right after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. I mean, imagine a city just wrapped in grief. Their leader is gone. That sense of stability they had known for years, it was suddenly shaken to its very core. But what's so interesting is that the community had actually been prepared for something like this. This verse you see here was a constant reminder that history moves in cycles. Good times don't last forever, but neither do the tough times. It's this teaching that hardship always follows ease, and that your faith is what gets you through that turn of the tide. And believe me, the tide was turning. Yeah, that grief pretty quickly morphed into real fear. As news of the prophet's death spread, a lot of the surrounding tribes saw an opening. They started to rebel, and there was this very real danger they would just march on Medina itself. The survival of the entire state was literally hanging by a thread. And all eyes, of course, turned to the new Caliph, the new leader, Abu Bakr. And this is exactly where Abu Bakr faced his first huge test. See, before he passed, the Prophet had given one final command. But in their current crisis, following that command seemed like the absolute worst possible move. This was a massive test of conviction. The dilemma is laid out perfectly right here. On one side, you have the Prophet's explicit final order: send an army north to the Syrian front. But on the other side, you have the stark reality: Medina is completely exposed. Sending their main fighting force away would leave the capital defenseless. I mean, many of the best companions were arguing to keep the army at home. It just seemed like basic common sense, right? But Abu Bakr's response? It was just absolute. With this one powerful statement, he shut down all debate. His conviction wasn't based on his own strategic opinion or the fear everyone was feeling. It was based on something he believed was far, far more certain. And this just gets to the heart of the matter. For Abu Bakr, the discussion was already over the moment the Prophet had given the order. The Quran itself says that believers don't really have a choice in a matter once it's been decided by God and his messenger. So human reasoning, strategic analysis, even what the majority thinks, none of it, not a single bit, could override that command. But making the tough call was only half the story. The way Abu Bakr carried it out taught an equally profound lesson. But this time it was all about humility. So, a huge point of contention was the commander himself, Usamah ibn Zayd. Why? Well, he was only 18 or 20 years old. A young man appointed to lead an army full of seasoned veteran companions. Now contrast that with Abu Bakr, the Caliph, the leader of the entire Muslim world, who was over 60. This age gap right here sets the stage for one of the most powerful gestures of leadership you will ever come across. As the army left the city, Abu Bakr, the elder statesman, the Caliph, walked on the dusty ground right beside Usamah, the young commander, who was up on his horse. Can you just picture that for a second? He was sending a message to every single person watching. My personal status means absolutely nothing compared to honoring an appointment made by the Prophet. He was publicly validating Usamah's authority and basically telling the army, you will accept and submit to his leadership. This single act was the living, breathing embodiment of this Quranic principle. Abu Bakr wasn't just telling people to obey, he was showing them that obedience himself in the most humble and public way imaginable. He was truly practicing what he preached. But there was something else that made this army different. Its mission wasn't just military, it was deeply moral. Abu Bakr, following the Prophet's example, gave the soldiers a strict code of conduct that would define their entire campaign. Seriously, take a second and just read these rules. This isn't just a list of don'ts. It's a revolutionary code of ethics for war, especially for that time in history. It commands the protection of non-combatants, the environment, private property, and even the monasteries of other faiths. It set a completely new standard of mercy in the middle of conflict. So, at the end of the day, this army was sent not just as a fighting force, but as a moral example. It was designed to show the world that their strength came with discipline and with mercy, not with destruction. They weren't there to burn everything to the ground. They were there to establish justice. So, the big question is, what happened? What was the result of this seemingly reckless, totally faith-based decision to send their army away, led by a young commander, with this strict moral code? Well, the outcome was more successful than anyone could have possibly imagined. The effect was amazing, and it was twofold. First, those rebellious Arab tribes who were thinking about attacking Medina, they were suddenly filled with fear. They thought, wait, if they're strong enough to send a whole army north at a time like this, we don't stand a chance. And second, the Byzantines were just stunned. Their reaction was basically, what is with these people? Their leader dies and they still come to raid our land. And this part is fascinating. The army's reputation and the sheer boldness of sending them out did all the heavy lifting. That psychological impact proved to be way more effective than any troops or weapons. The borders were secured, the internal rebellion just fizzled out, and the state was stabilized. All because Abu Bakr chose to follow a command over his own strategic fears. You know, this whole story is a perfect fulfillment of this promise from the Quran. The community went through the hardship of grief, of fear, and of a really difficult decision. But because they held on to their principles with patience and with faith, they were granted not just relief, but a victory that secured their entire future. The ease truly did come right after the hardship. And that leaves us with something to think about. This story is over 1,400 years old, but its lessons on conviction in the face of fear, humility when you're in power, and principled ethical action, well, they feel more relevant today than ever. So what can we learn from it for the challenges we face in our own lives?